The receptionist handed me a clipboard with a stack of forms attached to it. Her practiced smile never reached her eyes. Fill these out completely. Make sure to check any boxes for high-risk behaviors or medical conditions. When you're done, take a seat until we call your name. I nodded, the shame burning hot beneath my skin as I retreated to an empty corner of the donation sense waiting room. The blue vinyl chair squeaked as I sat down and I stared at the forms, my vision blurring slightly. Harper Bennett, age 53. Current address. I hesitated, then wrote down my sister Claire's address. 6 months ago I would have written the penthouse on Lakeshore Drive. 6 months and a lifetime ago. Around me, college students scrolled through phones. An elderly man dozed in the corner. And a young woman in scrubs, probably coming off a night shift, filled out her own forms with practiced efficiency. All of us here to trade parts of ourselves for cash. The difference was that they looked like this was routine. I felt like an imposter in my carefully pressed blouse. The last remnant of my former wardrobe saved for job interviews that never materialized. Just for the plasma, I whispered to myself, clicking my pen repeatedly. Just $40 for Mia's medication. My daughter's asthma had flared badly since we lost our health insurance. The medication cost $60 and I had exactly $22 or $47 in my checking account. I'd spent the morning calling pharmacies searching for the lowest price, but there was no way around it. My daughter needed her inhaler and I was out of options. I filled out the medical questionnaire with meticulous honesty. No recent tattoos, no travel to malaria-endemic countries in the past 6 months, a first in decades. I used to coordinate events around the world. No history of drug use. No. I hadn't recently been in prison. Have you ever fainted during a medical procedure? I checked no, though I considered checking yes, just to have someone attend to me a bit more carefully. I hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch. A peanut butter sandwich at Claire's kitchen table while she was at work. The lowest moment of a day filled with low moments. Harper Bennett, a young woman in colorful scrubs, stood at the doorway, clipboard in hand. I gathered my purse and followed her through to a small screening room with a blood pressure cuff and scale. First-time donor? She asked, gesturing for me to sit. Is it that obvious? I attempted a smile. We remember our regulars, she said kindly, wrapping the cuff around my arm. I'm Andrea. I'll be handling your intake and initial screening today. Andrea was probably in her late 20s, with a warm smile and gentle efficiency as she took my vitals. When she wrapped the tourniquet around my arm to check my veins, she let out an appreciative whistle. You have amazing veins for donation, she said. This is going to be super easy. Some folks we have to hunt and prod, but yours are right there saying hello. At least some part of me is still functioning properly, I muttered before I could stop myself. Andrea gave me a curious look but didn't pry. Instead, she prepared to take the preliminary blood sample, swabbing the crook of my arm with alcohol. Small pinch, she warned, and then slid the needle in. I barely felt it. See, perfect veins. You were made for this. The dark red liquid filled the small vial quickly. Andrea labeled it and set it aside, then prepped a second tube. Just need to check a few basic levels before we proceed with the full donation. As she worked, I found myself studying the donation center more carefully. The walls were lined with posters about saving lives, community service, and the scientific benefits of plasma donation. Nothing about the $40 that had brought me and likely most others here today. All done with this part, Andrea said, placing a cotton ball over the tiny puncture and bending my arm up. I'll run these quick tests, and if everything looks good, we'll get you set up for the full donation. Should only take a few minutes. I nodded, waiting patiently while she left with my blood samples. Through the thin walls, I could hear the quiet hum of machines and occasional beeps from the donation room next door. The reality of what I was doing, selling my plasma to buy my daughter's medication, hit me anew. How had Elegance by Harper, the premier event planning business in Chicago for 2 decades, collapsed so completely? How had Gavin, my husband of 25 years, walked away so easily? You've ruined our lives, he'd said, packing his clothes while I sat numb on our bed, as if the spoiled seafood that poisoned half the guests at the Lakeside Bank's anniversary gala had been a deliberate act on my part, rather than a catastrophic equipment failure. I was pulled from my bitter memories when the door opened again. Andrea returned, but her expression had changed dramatically. She was pale, her eyes wide, clutching my blood sample tube as if it contained nitroglycerin. Mrs. Bennett, she said, her voice noticeably different. I need to she stopped, composed herself. Would you mind waiting just a few more minutes? Dr. Stewart needs to verify something with your sample. Is something wrong? My heart skipped. Am I sick? No, it's not like that. Her reassurance seemed genuine. It's actually just wait, please. Dr. Stewart will explain everything. Before I could press further, she hurried out again, still carrying my blood sample. 5 minutes stretched to 10, then 15. I considered gathering my things and leaving. Clearly, something strange was happening when the door opened again. A man in his late 40s wearing a white coat entered, followed by Andrea. His expression was one of barely contained excitement. Mrs. Bennett, I'm Dr. James Stewart, medical director here. He extended his hand, which I shook automatically. I apologize for the wait, but we needed to confirm something quite extraordinary about your blood. Extraordinary? I repeated. Yes. He sat on the rolling stool across from me, leaning forward. Mrs. Bennett, you have what we call Rh Null blood. It's often referred to as golden blood because it's the rarest blood type on Earth. There are only about 42 known people worldwide with this blood type. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. I'm sorry. What? Your blood lacks all rhesus antigens. It's universally compatible with any other rare blood type. His voice contained an almost reverential quality. To find a new Rh Null donor is, well, it's like discovering a unicorn. As I struggled to process this information, a sharp series of beeps came from Dr. Stewart's pocket. He pulled out a pager, glanced at it, and his eyebrows shot up. Mrs. Bennett, would you excuse me for just a moment? This is urgent. I'll be right back to explain everything in more detail. He left the room in a rush, leaving me alone with Andrea, who was still looking at me like I'd sprouted wings. What does this mean? I asked her. I just came for $40. Andrea smiled, a strange mix of awe and sympathy in her expression. I think, Mrs. Bennett, your day is about to change in ways you can't imagine. 20 minutes later, Dr. Stewart returned with a third person in tow, a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, who looked wildly out of place among the clinic's utilitarian furnishings. His presence exuded authority, like someone accustomed to rooms falling silent when he entered. Mrs. Bennett, this is Tim Blackwood, Dr. Stewart said, his voice pitched slightly higher than before. He's a representative for the Richter family and has come here specifically to speak with you. The suited man stepped forward, extending a manicured hand. Mrs. Bennett, it's an honor. I apologize for this unconventional introduction, but time is of the essence. I shook his hand automatically, feeling increasingly disoriented. I don't understand what's happening. Dr. Stewart gestured for everyone to sit. Our system automatically logs rare blood types in an international database. When we confirmed your Rh Null status, it triggered an alert. Mr. Blackwood was already in Chicago on other business. Fortuitous timing, Tim Blackwood said with practiced smoothness. Mrs. Bennett, are you familiar with Alexander Richter? The name rang a distant bell. The Swiss banker. I believe his family sponsored the International Finance Summit in Geneva a few years ago. My company had bid on the event but lost to a local firm. Precisely. Blackwood nodded, seemingly impressed. Mr. Richter is currently facing a critical health situation. He requires heart surgery that can only be performed with transfusions from an Rh Null donor. His medical team has been searching for a compatible donor for weeks. Dr. Stewart added, your blood type is the only match they found in the Western Hemisphere. I looked between them, struggling to process what they were implying. You want my blood for this billionaire surgery? We're prepared to compensate you substantially for your assistance, Blackwood said, opening a slim leather portfolio. The Richter family is offering $3 million for your immediate cooperation. A private jet is standing by at the executive airport to transport you to Switzerland today. The room seemed to tilt slightly. $3 million. The procedure would require multiple donations over approximately 2 weeks. Dr. Stewart explained. It's intensive but not dangerous with proper medical supervision, which you would receive at Switzerland's finest private clinic. $3 million. The figure hung in the air, almost absurd in its magnitude. 6 hours ago, I'd been panicking about finding $40 for my daughter's medication. My business debts alone had topped $2 million. Everything I'd built over 20 years, gone in a single disastrous night. And now this stranger was offering to erase it all because of something in my veins I hadn't even known existed until today. This is a joke, right? I whispered. I assure you, Mrs. Bennet, this is entirely serious, Blackwood said. Perhaps this will convince you. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times and handed it to me. On the screen was a bank transfer authorization for $250,000. A deposit, he explained. My hands trembled as I handed back the phone. I need to call my daughter. Andrea quickly brought me a private office with a phone. Mia answered on the second ring. Mom, is everything okay? Did you get the money for Mia? Something incredible just happened. My voice shook as I explained the situation as best I could. There was a long silence after I finished. Mom, this sounds insane, she finally said. Like organ trafficking or something. I verified Dr. Stewart's credentials, I assured her, having insisted on seeing his medical license before making the call. And the RTR banking group is legitimate. I catered an event for one of their partner firms years ago. So, you're going to Switzerland today? If I do this, we can pay off all the debt. You can go back to school. We can start over. Another pause. What's the alternative? Not doing it. I considered this. If I walked away, I'd still be homeless, unemployed, and desperate for $40. My daughter would still be working retail instead of finishing her architecture degree. I don't think there is an alternative, honey. Then go, Mia said firmly. But promise you'll stay in constant contact and have everything in writing before you agree. After hanging up, I requested time to review the contract Blackwood had produced. Years of negotiating catering contracts had taught me to read fine print carefully. The agreement was comprehensive. The sum, the medical protocols, accommodations at a private clinic, transportation. I insisted on several modifications, a detailed schedule of donations, limits on volume per session, and an explicit right to halt the process if my health was compromised. Blackwood seemed surprised by my thoroughness, but acquiesced to my changes. You're more astute than I anticipated, Mrs. Bennet. Until recently, I ran a multi-million-dollar company, I replied evenly. This may be unusual business, but it's still business. 3 hours later, I found myself ascending the steps to a private Gulfstream jet, carrying only my purse and a small overnight bag hastily packed from Claire's guest room. Andrea had hugged me goodbye, slipping me her personal number and extracting a promise to let her know I was safe. As the plane taxied for takeoff, I stared out the window at Chicago's skyline, growing smaller. Somewhere in that grid of buildings was the luxury apartment I'd lost, the office where I'd built my company, and the life I'd thought defined me. Mrs. Bennet, can I offer you something to drink? A flight attendant appeared at my side. We have a full meal service prepared for the flight to Zurich. Just water for now, thank you. My stomach was too knotted to consider food. Across the aisle, Tim Blackwood worked on his laptop, occasionally making calls in fluent German and French. From snippets, I overheard Alexander Richter's condition had stabilized enough for surgery, but they were in a race against time. As the plane leveled at cruising altitude, I pulled out my compact mirror and studied my reflection. I looked like the same Harper Bennett, the silver strands in my dark hair that I'd finally stopped dyeing last year. The fine lines around my eyes that Gavin had suggested I do something about. The stubborn set of my jaw that my father always said I'd inherited from him. Nothing about me suggested I carried something so rare and valuable inside. Mrs. Bennet, Blackwood called, interrupting my thoughts. Dr. Klaus Baer, Mr. Reuter's personal physician, would like to speak with you via video conference to explain the medical procedure in detail. As I moved to join him, a strange calm settled over me. 24 hours ago, I was worthless, abandoned by my husband, a failed businesswoman, a burden on my sister. Now I was racing across the Atlantic because my blood could save one of the wealthiest men in Europe. The irony wasn't lost on me. After losing everything external that I thought defined my value, it turned out my true worth was something I'd been carrying in my veins all along. The private clinic perched on the edge of Lake Geneva looked more like a luxury resort than a medical facility. Florida's ceiling windows captured the stunning panorama of alpine mountains reflecting in crystal waters. My suite, and it was a suite, not a hospital room, featured a separate sitting area, a marble bathroom larger than Claire's entire guest room, and a private balcony with a view that would have cost thousands per night in my former life. I'd barely settled in when a soft knock announced the arrival of my medical team. Dr. Klaus Baer was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an academic air. He was accompanied by two nurses who exuded the quiet efficiency that defined Swiss healthcare. "Mrs. Bennet, welcome to Clinique de Salp," Dr. Weber said, his English precise with only the faintest German accent. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Quite," I replied, still adjusting to this surreal transition from desperate plasma donor to VIP patient. "Though I'm eager to understand exactly what I've agreed to," Dr. Weber nodded approvingly. "Of course, transparency is essential." He gestured to the sitting area where the nurses were already setting up equipment for what appeared to be a preliminary examination. Over the next hour, Dr. Weber explained the procedure in meticulous detail. Alexander Richter suffered from a rare congenital heart defect that had recently deteriorated, requiring urgent surgery. The procedure was complex and would require multiple blood transfusions. But the real challenge was his immune system's hypersensitivity. Any blood except Rh Null would trigger a catastrophic reaction. "Your blood is quite literally the difference between life and death for Mr. Richter," Dr. Weber concluded. "We will require several donations before surgery and potentially more during his recovery phase." As he spoke, the nurses took my vitals, drew blood samples, and performed a comprehensive health assessment. I submitted to their tests, watching with detached curiosity as they handled my blood samples with extraordinary care, labeling them with color-coded systems I didn't recognize. "When will the first donation take place?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning if your tests confirm you're in suitable condition," Dr. Weber replied. "We've designed a nutrition and hydration protocol to optimize your recovery between donations." He handed me a leather-bound folder. "Your complete schedule, dietary guidelines, and supplementation regimen are detailed here." After they left, I stood on the balcony watching twilight settle over Lake Geneva. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine from the surrounding forests. I tried calling Mia, but it went to voicemail. He would be at work now. Instead, I sent her photos of the clinic and a detailed update on the medical plan. My phone buzzed with an incoming text just as I was finishing. To my surprise, it was from Gavin, my first contact from him in months that wasn't through lawyers. "Harper heard rumors you're in Switzerland for some medical procedure. Are you ill? Should I be concerned?" The message was so perfectly Gavin, phrased as concern, but undoubtedly motivated by self-interest. Had news about my rare blood condition already leaked to the press, or had he somehow tracked my sudden international travel? I typed and deleted several responses before settling on. "Not ill. Taking care of business. No need for concern." His reply came immediately. "We should talk when you return. I've been doing some thinking about our situation." I laughed out loud, the sound echoing across the empty suite. "I bet you have," I muttered, leaving him on read. "The man who told me I'd ruined our lives. Who emptied our joint accounts before I even knew what was happening. Who moved in with his 32-year-old marketing coordinator while I was still reeling from the collapse of my business. That man suddenly wanted to talk now that I might have access to millions." A knock interrupted my bitter reminiscence. When I opened the door, I found Tim Blackwood holding a garment bag. "Mrs. Bennet, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said. "Mr. Arthur has requested your presence at dinner if you're feeling up to it." "Mr. Richter is here?" I asked, surprised. I assumed he'd be in intensive care. "He's in the private wing," Blackwood explained. "Against medical advice, he insists on meeting the woman whose blood will save his life. The dinner will be brief and carefully monitored by Dr. Weber." He handed me the garment bag. "We took the liberty of providing appropriate attire, as we understood your travel arrangements were hastily made." Inside was an elegant black dress that looked suspiciously my size, along with shoes and a simple pearl necklace. The presumption might have offended me once, but pragmatism overrode pride. I hadn't packed anything suitable for dining with a billionaire. 90 minutes later, I was escorted to a private dining room where Alexander Richter awaited. My first impression was of a man whose physical frailty contrasted sharply with his commanding presence. Tall and gaunt, with deep-set eyes that evaluated me with unsettling intensity, he rose slowly as I entered, leaning slightly on an ornate walking stick. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "Please join me." He gestured to the chair across from him at a small table elegantly set for two. A nurse stood discreetly in the corner, monitoring his vital signs remotely on a tablet. "Mr. Richter," I acknowledged, taking the offered seat. "I must admit, this isn't how I expected my day to unfold when I woke this morning." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Nor did I anticipate meeting the woman whose veins hold the key to my survival. He poured water from a crystal carafe. Tell me, what circumstances led you to that donation center in Chicago today? The directness of his question caught me off guard. I needed $40 for my daughter's asthma medication. He raised an eyebrow. $40? That seems a remarkably small sum to drive someone of your apparent quality to sell their plasma. I bristled slightly at his assumption, even if it was accurate. 6 months ago, I owned a successful event planning business, a penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, and thought I had a solid marriage. Life can change quickly, Mr. Richter. Indeed it can, he agreed, studying me with renewed interest as servers silently appeared with our first course. What happened? Perhaps it was the surreality of the situation or simple exhaustion. But I found myself telling him the unvarnished truth about the catastrophic equipment failure that poisoned half the guests at the Lakeside Bank Gala, the lawsuits that followed, the supplier who declared bankruptcy, leaving me liable, and finally Gavin's abandonment when our assets evaporated. So this morning I needed $40 I didn't have, I concluded, realizing I'd barely touched my food during this recounting. And now I'm dining in Switzerland with a man prepared to pay millions for my blood. Life is nothing if not unpredictable. Arthur listened without interruption, his expression inscrutable. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment before responding. Do you know what I find most interesting about your story, Mrs. Bennet? He asked finally. What's that? You've lost everything external, your business, your home, your husband. Yet you still carry within you something of extraordinary value that no one can take away. He gestured toward my arm, where the tiny mark from this morning's blood test was barely visible. There's a profound metaphor there, don't you think? Our eyes met across the table, and in that moment, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years, perhaps even during my marriage. This stranger, this billionaire fighting for his life, had distilled my situation to its essence in a way that both disarmed and disturbed me. I suppose there is, I agreed quietly, though I'd trade metaphorical profundity for my daughter's college tuition in a heartbeat. He laughed then, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him before a slight cease crossed his features. The nurse immediately stepped forward, but he waved her away. I believe we'll get along well, Mrs. Bennet, he said, composing himself, and I suspect our arrangement may benefit us both in ways neither of us yet understands. The first donation took place the following morning in a state-of-the-art room that resembled a spa more than a medical facility. I reclined on a heated leather chair as Dr. Weber's team prepared their equipment with choreographed precision. The process was similar to standard blood donation, but with significantly more monitoring equipment and 2 nurses attending to me at all times. We'll be taking 1 unit today, Dr. Weber explained, checking the catheter in my arm. Your comfort and safety are our priority, Mrs. Bennet. If you experience any discomfort, please alert us immediately. I nodded, watching my dark red blood flow through the tube and into a specialized collection bag. The rich crimson liquid that had been worthless to me yesterday was now being handled like liquid gold. What makes my blood so special? I asked, genuinely curious. I understand it's rare, but what exactly is different about it? Dr. Weber adjusted his glasses, seemingly pleased by my interest. Most people have rhesus antigens, protein markers on their red blood cells. You have none. Your blood lacks all 61 possible rhesus antigens, making it compatible with any blood type in emergency situations. More importantly, for Mr. Richter's case, your blood won't trigger the severe immune response that would occur with standard transfusions. And no one in his family is a match. Blood type isn't simply inherited like eye color, he explained. Rh Null is caused by a specific genetic mutation. The odds of finding it in his family were negligible. The donation took less than 15 minutes, but Dr. Weber insisted I remain for observation for 2 hours afterward. A chef delivered a gourmet meal rich in iron and proteins along with fresh pressed juice and mineral supplements. The level of care was extraordinary, a stark contrast to the assembly line approach I'd expected at the Chicago Donation Center. When I returned to my suite, I found a small gift box waiting on the coffee table with a handwritten note from Alexander Richter, a token of appreciation for today's contribution. The first of many, I hope, AR. Inside was a delicate platinum bracelet with a single ruby charm, simple but elegant and undoubtedly expensive. I set it aside, unsure about the propriety of accepting such a gift, and called Mia. Mom, she answered immediately. I was about to call you. Are you okay? Did they take your blood yet? Just finished, I assured her. The procedure was easy. Much more pleasant than I imagined the donation center would have been. I described the clinic and the meticulous care I was receiving. That's good, she said, but I detected hesitation in her voice. What's wrong, honey? Dad showed up at Aunt Claire's looking for you. Her tone hardened. When Claire told him you were in Switzerland, he started asking all these questions about why and who you were with. He seemed, calculating. I sighed, unsurprised. He texted me yesterday. Did he mention wanting to talk when I get back? Yes. He told Claire he'd been rethinking things and realized he'd acted hastily. Can you believe that? Unfortunately, I can. I moved to the balcony, staring out at the lake. Has anything about my blood condition hit the news? Nothing specific, but there was a small article about the Richter banking group preparing for a major medical procedure involving their CEO. It mentioned flying in a critical medical resource from America. Maybe he connected the dots. Gavin had always been astute about following money. If he'd caught even a whisper of my potential windfall, he would reappear like a shark in blood. An ironic metaphor given the circumstances. Mom, Mia continued, her voice dropping. You wouldn't consider getting back together with him, would you? Absolutely not, I said firmly. 25 years of marriage ended the moment he walked out. No amount of money changes that. After we hung up, I spent the afternoon resting as instructed, flipping through Swiss magazines without really seeing them. My mind kept returning to Alexander Richter's observation. How I'd lost everything external yet still carried something of extraordinary value inside me. The metaphor wasn't lost on me, but I couldn't help wondering, was my value now reduced to this biological quirk? Was I merely a resource again, this time for my blood instead of my event planning expertise? A knock interrupted my brooding. Andrea Rodriguez, the nurse from Chicago, stood at my door, her familiar face a surprising comfort in this foreign environment. Andrea, what are you doing here? I exclaimed. She smiled broadly. Dr. Stewart arranged for me to join the medical team. Since I was the first to identify your Rh Null status, they thought I might be helpful during the donation process. She looked around the suite, clearly impressed. Quite a step up from our clinic, isn't it? We settled in the sitting area, and Andrea's presence eased some of my isolation. She explained that she'd specialized in rare blood disorders during her training before financial necessity pushed her toward the steadier income of the donation center. How are you holding up? She asked. It's a lot to process in 24 hours. Surreal, I admitted. Yesterday I was desperate for $40 and today a billionaire gave me a ruby bracelet for 1 unit of blood. Andrea's eyes widened. He gave you jewelry? I showed her the bracelet still in its box. Is that inappropriate? I haven't decided whether to accept it. It's unusual, she said carefully. In normal medical practice, there are strict ethical guidelines about gifts between patients and donors, but nothing about this situation is normal. We were interrupted by Tim Blackwood, who appeared with an update on the schedule. My blood work showed excellent recovery, and they wanted to proceed with a second donation the following morning. The surgery was tentatively scheduled for 3 days later. Mr. Richter has also requested another meeting with you tomorrow evening, Blackwood added. He found your conversation stimulating and believes reducing his stress levels will benefit his pre-surgical condition. Is that medically sound, or is he using his condition to get what he wants? I asked bluntly. Blackwood's expression remained professional, but I caught a flicker of amusement in his eyes. In my experience, Mrs. Bennett, with Mr. Richter, those two things are rarely mutually exclusive. After he left, Andrea gave me a concerned look. Just be careful about boundaries, Harper. The power dynamic here is already complicated enough. He was right. Of course, I was simultaneously invaluable and vulnerable. The literal lifeblood for a man accustomed to wielding enormous power yet dependent on his financial rescue. I needed to navigate this strange relationship carefully. That evening, I received another text from Gavin called Claire looking for you. Why didn't you tell me about Switzerland? What medical procedure requires international travel? We should discuss this together as family. I stared at the message, anger bubbling up from some deep reservoir I thought had run dry months ago. As family, I said aloud to the empty room. The audacity was breathtaking. The man who'd emptied our accounts and moved in with another woman while I was still shell-shocked from losing my business now wanted to invoke family ties. I typed a reply, deleting and rewriting several times before settling on. We're not family anymore, Gavin. You made that abundantly clear when you left. My medical decisions are no longer your concern. His response came immediately. Don't be hasty, Harper. People make mistakes. I've been thinking a lot about us lately. I bet you have, I muttered, setting my phone aside without responding. I moved to the window, watching lights twinkle along the shoreline of Lake Geneva. Tomorrow they would take more of my blood. This substance that had suddenly transformed me from worthless to priceless in the eyes of the world. But its value had always been there, unrecognized, flowing through my veins every day of my life. The realization brought an unexpected sense of peace. Whatever happened with Alexander Richter, whatever Gavin was plotting, whatever the future held, I carried my true worth within me and always had. By the third day, the clinic staff had settled into a routine around my presence. The morning nurses greeted me by name. The chef prepared my post-donation meals according to my preferences, and even Tim Blackwood had softened his formal demeanor slightly. I donated 2 units of blood with a third scheduled for tomorrow, and my body was holding up well thanks to the meticulous care I was receiving. What I hadn't expected was Alexander Richter's continued interest in my company. After our initial dinner, he'd requested another meeting and then another. Each conversation revealed more layers to this complex man who held such power in the financial world, yet now found himself utterly dependent on a stranger's biological quirk. You didn't have to accept, you know, he remarked during our third meeting, a lunch in the clinic's private garden. Despite his frail appearance, he insisted on being outdoors whenever possible. You could have named your price, demanded 10 million, 20. In my position I would have paid it. I considered this as I sipped my mineral water. Perhaps that's why you're a banker and I ran an event company. Different instincts indeed. His piercing gaze studied me, though I suspect it's more than that. You accepted quickly, but you negotiated terms carefully. Medical safety protocols, schedule limitations, clear boundaries. You wanted fair compensation, not exploitation. That speaks to character. I shrugged, uncomfortable with his analysis. Or perhaps just business sense. My company may have failed, but I learned a few things in 20 years. Tell me about it, he said, surprising me. Your company, what made it special before the incident? No one had asked me about Elegance by Harper since its collapse. People either avoided the topic entirely or spoke of it in hushed, pitying tones, but Alexander's question held genuine curiosity. So, I found myself describing the business I'd built from a one-woman operation in my apartment to a staff of 47 with corporate clients across the Midwest. Our signature was personalization. We never used templates. Every event was built from the ground up based on the client's vision and needs. Pride crept into my voice despite myself. We were known for solving impossible problems. The mayor once called us the Navy SEALs of event planning. Something seemed logistically impossible, we were the ones they called. Until the seafood incident, he noted not unkindly. Until then, I agreed. One equipment failure, one bad night, and 20 years of reputation vanished. Alexander shifted in his chair, a slight cease betraying his discomfort despite his attempts to hide it. The business world can be merciless that way. One misstep erases 1,000 successes. Is that what happened to you? I asked boldly. A misstep? He raised an eyebrow, clearly unused to such direct questioning. My condition is congenital, a birth defect, though it manifested serious symptoms only recently. I met with your family, I clarified. I've noticed no one has visited you. For someone preparing for life-threatening surgery, you seem remarkably alone. A shadow crossed his face. My family situation is complicated. My ex-wife lives in Monaco with her third husband. My son manages our Asian operations from Singapore. They've been notified, of course, but they haven't come. They'll attend my funeral if necessary, he said with surprising detachment. Or the press conference announcing my recovery should you and Dr. Weber succeed. The casual way he referenced his possible death struck me. Doesn't that bother you, being alone at a time like this? He gestured around us at the private clinic. I'm hardly alone. I have a full medical team, staff attending to my every need. And now you, my golden-blooded savior. That's not the same as family. Perhaps not. He examined me with renewed interest. Yet you're hardly surrounded by loved ones yourself, Mrs. Bennett. Your daughter remains in Chicago, and from what you've mentioned of your sister, your relationship seems strained at best. The observation stung because it was accurate. I changed the subject. Is there anything you want to do before the surgery? Anywhere you'd like to go while you still can? He seemed amused by the question. You sound as though you're offering to fulfill a dying man's last wish. I'm offering a distraction, I corrected. Sitting here counting down to surgery can't be good for your stress levels. To my surprise, he considered the suggestion seriously. There is a small art gallery in the old town. They're exhibiting a collection I've been interested in seeing. Then we should go, I said impulsively. If Dr. Waber approves, of course. That afternoon, after considerable negotiation with the medical team, we set out for the gallery in Alexander's private limousine. A nurse accompanied us, discreetly monitoring his vitals via a small device he wore beneath his immaculate suit. The gallery had been closed to the public for our visit. Another reminder of the power this man wielded, even from his sick bed. The exhibition featured contemporary European artists exploring themes of transience and permanence, a subject that struck me as almost too on the nose given our circumstances. Alexander moved slowly through the space, occasionally pausing to examine a piece more closely. I noticed he was particularly drawn to the more provocative works, those that challenged conventional aesthetics or presented uncomfortable juxtapositions. "What do you see in this one?" he asked, stopping before a large canvas that appeared to my untrained eye as chaotic splashes of red against a dark background. "Honestly, it looks like a bloodbath," I said without thinking. To my relief, he laughed. A genuine sound that momentarily transformed his austere features. "Precisely why I appreciate your company, Mrs. Bennet. No artificial analysis, no pretension." "Harper," I said suddenly. "If we're going to be bound by blood literally, you might as well use my first name." "Harper," he repeated as if testing the sound. "And I am Alexander, though most call me Alex, not Mr. Richter," I asked with mild sarcasm. "Only those who want something from me," he replied wryly. We continued through the gallery, our conversation flowing more naturally now. By the time we returned to the clinic, I realized I'd spent the afternoon not thinking about Gavin's texts, my financial situation, or even the strangeness of my current circumstances. For a few hours I'd simply been Harper again, engaged, curious, present. Back in my suite, I found 3 missed calls from Mia and a text message that sent ice through my veins. Dad showed up at my apartment. He knows about the RTOR situation. It's in the financial press now. Some article about rare blood donor saves banking mogul. He's talking about family interests and legal community property. Call me ASAP. I called her immediately, my hands shaking slightly. What exactly did he say? He's claiming that since you were still legally married when you made the agreement with RTOR, he's entitled to half of any compensation as community property. Mia's voice trembled with anger. He's consulted a lawyer, Mom. I closed my eyes. The brief normality of the afternoon shattering around me. Of course, Gavin would find a way to insert himself into this situation. Of course he would try to claim what was mine. Did he threaten you? I asked, sudden maternal protectiveness surging through me. Not exactly, Mia said. He was trying to be charming. You know how he gets when he wants something. But when I told him to leave, he said I should consider my future and how this money could benefit all of us as a family. The familiar manipulation tactics made my stomach turn. I'll handle it, I promised her. The divorce may not be finalized, but we have a signed separation agreement that clearly divides assets. He can't touch this, but even as I reassured Mia, doubt crept in. The separation agreement had been signed before either of us knew about my golden blood or the compensation it would bring. Would that matter legally? After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with blood donation. The universe seemed determined to remind me that every silver lining came with a new cloud. I'd found an unexpected lifeline, only to have Gavin's grasping hands reaching for it. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Andrea stood there, concern evident on her face. "Bad news from home?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Why, X?" I explained wearily. "He's making noises about claiming half the RTOR money." Andrea's expression hardened. "Some people really show their true colors when money's involved, don't they?" "Gavin showed his true colors months ago," I replied. "This is just the encore performance." The morning of Alexander's surgery dawned clear and crisp, the Alps razor sharp against a perfect blue sky. I'd made my final pre-surgery donation the previous day and felt surprisingly strong thanks to the clinic's aggressive nutritional support and rest protocols. From my balcony, I watched the medical helicopter land on the clinic's roof, bringing, I presumed, the specialized surgical team that would perform the procedure. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Thinking of you today. Let me know how everything goes with Mr. R's surgery. I smiled at my daughter's thoughtfulness. Despite everything she'd been through, her education interrupted, her stable life upended, her father's betrayal, Mia still maintained her innate empathy. I'd done something right in raising her at least. There had been no further contact from Gavin since I'd instructed my divorce attorney to send him a firmly worded cease and desist letter. Whether that would deter him remained to be seen, but for today I pushed those concerns aside. Today was about Alexander and the strange twist of fate that had brought us together. A knock announced Tim Blackwood, more formally dressed than usual in a dark suit and tie. Mrs. Bennett Harper, he corrected himself, adopting the more personal address Alexander had initiated. Mr. Richter has asked to see you before the surgery. Is that allowed? Asked surprised. I thought they'd be preparing him already. They are, Blackwood confirmed. This is unorthodox, but he was quite insistent. I followed him to the surgical wing, where I was given sterile garments to wear over my clothes before being allowed into a preoperative room. Alexander lay on a gurney, various monitors attached to his lean frame, and 4 already in place. He looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable, the hospital gown replacing his usual bespoke suits. Harper, he said when he saw me, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Thank you for coming. Of course, I replied, moving closer. How are you feeling? Physically? About as one would expect before having one's chest cracked open. His attempt at humor couldn't quite mask the tension in his voice. Mentally? That's why I asked to see you. He gestured for me to come closer, lowering his voice so the nurse across the room couldn't hear. There's a possibility I won't survive this. The doctors seem very confident, I began, but he cut me off with a small shake of his head. They're excellent and your blood has given me the best chance possible, but the reality remains. I'm 62 with a congenitally defective heart. The odds are significant. He paused, eyes locked on mine. If things go poorly, Blackwood has instructions regarding your compensation. You'll receive the full amount regardless. I wasn't worried about that, I said truthfully. I know. That's precisely why I felt the need to tell you. His hand moved slightly toward mine on the rail of the gurney, not quite touching. In our brief acquaintance, you've shown me more genuine human connection than most people in my life. You came to a donation center to help your daughter, not yourself. You negotiated firmly but fairly. You've treated me as a person, not a bank account. These things matter to me. I swallowed, unexpectedly moved by his words. You're going to be fine, Alexander. And when you're recovered, perhaps you can use some of those billions to find more of us golden-blooded unicorns, so the next person in your situation doesn't have to scramble so desperately. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Already thinking like a philanthropist. Money changes people, Harper. Be careful, says the billionaire banker, I countered. Precisely. His expression grew serious again. I wasn't always wealthy. I built RTOR banking group from a small regional operation into an international powerhouse. I've seen what money does to others and to myself. Before I could respond, Dr. Weber entered, his expression making it clear that our time was up. We need to proceed, Mr. Richter. Alexander nodded. One moment. He turned back to me. Whatever happens, thank you for your golden blood, Harper Bennett. It's worth far more than $3 million. Then you overpaid, I said lightly, trying to ease the sudden heaviness between us. I suspect in the end we'll find I got quite a bargain. With that enigmatic statement, he nodded to Dr. Weber, indicating he was ready. I was escorted back to my suite, where Andrea was waiting with a light breakfast and strict instructions for me to rest. The surgery will take at least 8 hours, she informed me. There's nothing to do but wait. Waiting had never been my strong suit. As an event planner, I was used to constant motion, solving problems, making decisions. Forced inactivity made me restless. After picking at my breakfast, I tried reading, then watching television, then scrolling through news sites on my tablet. Anything to distract from the strange anxiety I felt about Alexander's surgery. You're really worried about him, aren't you? Andrea observed, bringing me tea in morning. Is that strange? Is that strange? I asked. A week ago I'd never heard of him. Now I'm pacing about like a concerned friend, she suggested. It's not strange. You've literally given your blood to save his life. That creates a connection. It's more than that, I admitted. We've talked a lot these past days. He's not what I expected. Andrea gave me a knowing look. Reuter's reputation in financial circles is pretty cutthroat. The Alpine shark, some call him. I can see that side of him, I acknowledged. But there's more. Underneath all that power and control, he's just human, facing his mortality alone. Like you were when your husband left and your business collapsed, she observed quietly. The parallel hadn't escaped me. Perhaps that explained the unexpected rapport between us. Two people accustomed to control suddenly confronted with their own powerlessness. Around noon, Blackwood appeared with lunch and a brief update. The surgery was proceeding as expected with no complications thus far. He seemed surprised by my evident concern. You've developed quite an interest in Mr. Richter's welfare, he noted. Shouldn't I be interested in the outcome of a surgery that requires my rare blood type? I deflected. Blackwood studied me thoughtfully. In my 15 years working with Alexander Richter, I've rarely seen him connect with anyone the way he has with you. It's unexpected. We're hardly friends, I protested. We've just had a few conversations while I've been donating blood. Mr. Richter doesn't just have conversations, Blackwood replied. Every interaction has a purpose. His words unsettled me, suggesting an agenda behind Alexander's apparent openness. Was I being naive? Had our discussions been strategic rather than genuine? My phone chimed with a notification, mercifully interrupting this uncomfortable line of thought. It was an email from my divorce attorney. Gavin's lawyer has formally requested disclosure of the RTOR agreement as part of divorce discovery. We need to discuss strategy ASAP. A fresh wave of frustration washed over me. Even here, thousands of miles away, Gavin's grasping influence reached me. I forwarded the email to the attorney Blackwood had arranged to handle the RTOR agreement, asking for her opinion on the divorce implications. The rest of the day passed in excruciating slowness. I fielded a call from Claire, who seemed torn between concern and resentment over my sudden change in fortune. I spoke with Mia again, reassuring her about my health, while carefully avoiding details about Alexander that might find their way back to Gavin. At 7 that evening, Dr. Weber finally appeared at my door, still in his surgical scrubs, exhaustion evident in the lines of his face. The surgery is complete, he announced. Mr. Richter has survived the procedure. And his prognosis? I asked, my heart pounding unexpectedly hard. The next 48 hours are critical, Dr. Weber said cautiously. But we achieved everything we hoped to surgically. Your blood performed exactly as we needed it to. Without it, he left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. I sank into a chair, surprising myself with the intensity of my relief. When can I see him? Dr. Weber raised an eyebrow. He'll be unconscious in intensive care for at least 24 hours. There's no need for you to. When can I see him? I repeated firmly. He studied me for a moment before relenting. Perhaps tomorrow evening if his condition stabilizes briefly. After he left, I stood at the window watching nightfall over Lake Geneva. The lights of the city glittering like earthbound stars. Alexander had survived the surgery. The first hurdle cleared. Why this mattered so much to me beyond the practical implications of our agreement was a question I wasn't quite ready to examine. Alexander remained in intensive care for 3 days. His recovery proceeding more slowly than the medical team had hoped, but without major complication. During this time I found myself in a strange limbo, no longer actively donating blood, but not yet released to return home. Blackwood explained that I needed to remain available for potential additional donations during Alexander's recovery phase, but I suspected there was more to my continued presence at the clinic than medical necessity. On the 4th day post-surgery, I was finally permitted to visit Alexander. He was awake but heavily medicated. His usual sharp alertness dulled by painkillers and fatigue. Various tubes and monitors connected him to machines that beeped and hummed, tracking his vital functions with clinical precision. "Harper," he said when he saw me, his voice a rasp of its usual resonance. "You're still here. Where else would I be?" I replied, taking the chair beside his bed. Someone has to make sure all that golden blood wasn't wasted. A ghost of his usual smile touched his pale lips. Always practical. We sat in companionable silence for several minutes. The beeping monitors, a strange counterpoint to the unspoken current between us. Finally he spoke again, each word clearly requiring effort. "I had a dream during surgery. You were there. Was I planning an event?" I asked lightly. "No." His gaze, though clouded by medication, held mine. You were standing at a crossroads holding something bright in your hands. You offered it to me, but then he frowned slightly, the memory slipping away. I can't recall the rest. Sounds like an anesthesia dream, I said, oddly disturbed by his description. Perhaps he shifted slightly, wincing. Or perhaps symbolic. You quite literally offered me your life force. For $3 million, I reminded him, hardly a selfless gesture. We both know it wasn't just about the money. His eyes drifted closed, fatigue overtaking him. I sat with him until he fell asleep, troubled by his words. He was right, of course. Somewhere along this strange journey, the transaction had become something more complex than a simple exchange of blood for money. I'd begun to care about this man, his recovery, his future, his solitary existence despite his vast wealth. It was unexpected and slightly alarming. As I left the ICU, I nearly collided with a tall, impeccably dressed Asian man who shared Alexander's sharp features and penetrating gaze, though softened by youth. "Mrs. Bennet, I presume," he said, extending his hand. "David Richter, Alexander's son." I shook his hand, noting his firm grip and assessing gaze. "You've come from Singapore." As soon as I could arrange it, a flicker of something. Defensiveness perhaps crossed his face. Contrary to whatever my father may have implied, his family does care about his welfare. He said very little about his family, I replied diplomatically. David's expression suggested he didn't believe me, but he let it pass. "The doctors tell me, your blood saved his life. Our family owes you a debt of gratitude beyond the financial compensation." There was something rehearsed about his gratitude that reminded me of Gavin at his most professionally charming. I wondered how much this young man, who had clearly inherited his father's business acumen, if not his warmth, knew about my arrangement with Alexander. "I should let you visit your father," I said, stepping aside. "Actually, Mrs. Bennet, I was hoping we might speak privately first," he gestured toward the waiting area. "There are some aspects of your arrangement with my father I'd like to discuss." Warning bells rang in my mind. Any discussions about my agreement should include Tim Blackwood and the attorneys who drafted it. "Of course," he said smoothly. "I simply thought a preliminary conversation might be beneficial. My father, while brilliant in business, can sometimes be impulsive when his health is concerned." "Your father struck me as quite methodical," I countered, and I found Blackwood to be extremely thorough. David's polite smile tightened slightly. "Mrs. Bennet, my concern is simple. My father has developed a personal interest in you that extends beyond the medical necessity of your blood type. This could complicate matters when he's thinking more clearly." The implication was clear. He believed I was somehow manipulating Alexander during his vulnerability. The suggestion stung more than it should have. "Mr. Richter, I have no designs on your father or his fortune beyond our existing agreement." I met his gaze directly. "I came here to donate blood and be fairly compensated for it. Any personal connection that developed was initiated by Alexander, not me. I meant no offense." He backpedaled, though his eyes remained cool in assessing. "I'm simply looking out for family interests during a difficult time." "I understand completely," I replied, thinking of Gavin's sudden renewed interest in family once money entered the equation. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm due for a follow-up examination." That evening, Andrea found me on my balcony, staring out at the mountains as twilight painted them in shades of purple and gold. She handed me a glass of wine, a small luxury now that my donations were complete. "You seem troubled," she observed. "Is it Alexander's condition?" "Partly," I admitted, "and a rather tense conversation with his son." The prodigal son arrives." Andrea leaned against the railing. "He's been here less than a day and already the staff is talking about him. Very demanding, very corporate. He thinks I'm taking advantage of his father's vulnerability," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "Are you?" she asked bluntly. I turned to her, surprised. "Of course not." "Then why does it bother you what David Richter thinks?" She sipped her wine. "Unless you care more about Alexander than you're admitting." The question hung in the air between us. Uncomfortably precise. Did I care about Alexander Richter? The wealthy, powerful banker who had swept into my life on the back of a biological coincidence? The man whose blood money would resurrect my financial life? The patient whose recovery I found myself invested in beyond any practical consideration? "It's complicated," I finally said. "Life usually is." Andrea smiled sympathetically. "Look, whatever is happening between you and Alexander or not happening, it's nobody's business but yours. Not his son's, not Blackwood's, not even mine. There's nothing happening, I insisted. Perhaps too quickly. We've just connected somehow. Found common ground despite our very different circumstances. If you say so. Her tone made it clear she wasn't entirely convinced. By the way, Blackwood mentioned they're planning to move you to the residential wing tomorrow. Alexander's stable enough that they don't need you quite so close at hand medically. The news should have been welcome. The residential wing was apparently even more luxurious than my current suite with more independence and privacy. Instead, I felt a twinge of what? Disappointment at being moved further from Alexander. The thought was absurd. That makes sense, I said neutrally. Did he mention how much longer I'll need to stay in Switzerland? Another 2 weeks, possibly 3, Andrea replied. They want you available for any complications. Plus, there are some follow-up donations scheduled once Alexander is stronger. 2 more weeks in this strange bubble suspended between my old life and whatever came next. 2 more weeks of conversations with Alexander, watching him recover, navigating the complex dynamics with his son and staff. 2 more weeks before I had to face Gavin and his legal maneuvers. Before I had to decide what to do with my unexpected wealth. Before I had to rebuild my life from the ground up. What will you do when you go back? Andrea asked as if reading my thoughts. I took a long sip of wine, considering start over, I suppose. Pay off my debts, find a place to live, help Mia return to school. And professionally, the question gave me pause. I hadn't thought much beyond the immediate financial relief the RTOR payment would provide. My catering and event business was irreparably damaged, not just financially but reputationally. Starting over in the same industry would be an uphill battle at best. I don't know. I admitted 20 years in one business doesn't prepare you well for a midlife career change unless Andrea suggested you use what you've learned about crisis and recovery to help others navigate similar situations. The idea resonated unexpectedly, echoing conversations I'd had with Alexander about transforming failure into opportunity. Before I could explore it further, my phone buzzed with a text from Blackwood. Mr. Arthur is asking for you. If you're available, he seems quite insistent despite medical advice to rest. I showed Andrea the message and she raised an eyebrow. Nothing happening, huh? He's probably just bored and restless, I said, setting down my wine glass. You know how terrible patients can be. Oh, I do, she agreed with a knowing smile, especially when they only want to see one specific visitor. I ignored her implication and headed back inside to change before returning to the ICU. Whatever was happening between Alexander and me, this unexpected connection, this mutual recognition of something I couldn't quite name, it deserved exploration, not denial. And if his son or anyone else had opinions about it, well, I'd survived the collapse of my business and marriage. I could certainly handle a disapproving heir to a banking fortune. The residential wing of Clinique des Alpes resembled a 5-star alpine resort more than any medical facility I'd ever encountered. My new suite featured a full kitchen, a living area with a fireplace, and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the mountains like a living painting. Under different circumstances, I might have reveled in such luxury, but my thoughts remained distracted, split between concerns about Alexander's recovery, Gavin's legal maneuvers back home, and my own uncertain future. Alexander was moved from intensive care to a private recovery suite on the same day I transferred to the residential wing. Though still weak and requiring frequent monitoring, his natural authority reasserted itself quickly. Within days, he had established a modified work schedule, reviewing urgent banking matters via secure tablet and conducting brief video conferences with key executives, much to Dr. Weber's poorly concealed frustration. The man survived open-heart surgery less than a week ago, and he's already discussing international finance, Dr. Weber complained when I encountered him in the hallway. Perhaps next time we should remove the workaholic tendencies along with the defective valve, I laughed. I suspect those tendencies are hardwired deeper than his cardiac issues. Then you understand him well already, the doctor observed with a shrewd glance before continuing on his rounds. The comment lingered with me as I made my way to Alexander's suite for what had become our daily afternoon conversation, ostensibly to monitor my recovery as a donor, but in reality a mutual respite from our respective situations. Today I found him sitting up in a reclining chair rather than his bed, color gradually returning to his gaunt features. You look stronger, I remarked, taking my usual seat beside him. Appearances can be deceiving, he replied wryly. But yes, progress is being made. Thanks in no small part to your golden contribution. How are things with David? I asked, noting the stack of financial reports on his side table. Clearly his son's doing. Alexander's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. David is being David, efficiently managing the family business while simultaneously reminding me of my mortality and his readiness to assume control. He seems concerned about your welfare, I offered diplomatically. And about my relationship with you, Alexander added bluntly. He took me aside yesterday to express concern that I might be, how did he phrase it? Developing inappropriate attachments due to medical vulnerability. Heat rushed to my face. He implied something similar to me. I apologized for my son's presumption. David sees the world primarily through the lens of risk management and asset protection. His tone was matter-of-fact, but I detected a hint of regret beneath it. A trait he inherited from me, I'm afraid. You seem to have developed other perspectives, I observed. Nothing clarifies one's priorities quite like facing death. He adjusted his position slightly, wincing at the movement. Speaking of clarity, I've been thinking about your situation upon returning to Chicago. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. My situation, your ex-husband's legal maneuvering, your professional future, your daughter's education. He gestured to a folder on his table. I've taken the liberty of having Blackwood research some options. I stiffened. I don't recall asking for assistance beyond our original agreement. Alexander studied me, his gaze sharp despite his weakened state. You're offended. I'm surprised, I corrected, though he wasn't entirely wrong. I'm capable of managing my own affairs. Of course you are. But why struggle unnecessarily when I have resources that might prove useful? He pushed the folder toward me. Consider it repayment of a debt that extends beyond our financial arrangement. I hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. Finally, curiosity won out and I opened the folder. Inside were several documents. An analysis of Illinois divorce law regarding separation agreements and subsequently discovered assets, information about an exclusive arts college in Europe with a renowned architecture program, and most surprisingly, a detailed business plan for a consultation firm specializing in crisis recovery for businesses facing catastrophic setbacks. What is this? I asked, holding up the business plan. An idea sparked by our conversations. Alexander's expression remained neutral, but I detected a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. You have a unique perspective, someone who built a successful business, experienced a catastrophic failure and is now rebuilding. That knowledge is valuable. I flipped through the meticulously prepared projections, market analysis and potential client profiles. The concept was compelling, using my experience to help other businesses navigate crisis and recovery. A way to transform my personal disaster into professional wisdom. This is thorough, I said finally, unsure how to feel about him developing such a detailed plan without my knowledge. I have excellent analyst, he replied simply. And considerable experience recognizing untapped potential. Is that what I am? Untapped potential? The question came out more sharply than I intended. You're many things, Harper Bennett, he said quietly. Most of which have nothing to do with business opportunities or blood type. The air between us shifted, charged with unspoken currents. Before I could respond, a knock at the door announced the arrival of Dr. Weber for Alexander's scheduled examination. Relieved and frustrated in equal measure by the interruption, I excused myself, taking the folder with me. Back in my suite, I spread the contents across the coffee table, examining each document more carefully. The divorce analysis confirmed what my own attorney had suggested. Gavin's claim on the RTOR payment was tenuous at best, especially given the explicit division of assets in our separation agreement. The information about the arts college revealed it offered a scholarship program for international students with exceptional portfolios, something Mia might qualify for with her remarkable design work. But it was the business plan that kept drawing my attention. Eventuality Consulting, the proposed name with the tagline Beyond Crisis Management. The concept was elegant in its simplicity, leveraging my experience to help businesses navigate catastrophic setbacks, not just surviving but emerging stronger. Had Alexander somehow extracted this vision from our conversations, or had he recognized something in me that I hadn't yet acknowledged in myself? The thought was both flattering and unsettling. My phone rang, interrupting my contemplation. It was Mia. Mom, have you checked your email today? She asked without preamble, excitement vibrating in her voice. I got the strangest message from the International College of Design in Geneva. They're inviting me to submit my portfolio for a full scholarship program. They said they're expanding their search for exceptional North American talent and got my name from a recommendation. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. Did you have something to do with this? I glanced at the college brochure still lying open on my table. Not directly, I hedged. Was it him, Mr. Richter? Mia was too perceptive by half. Mom, is something going on between you two? He's a patient whose life I helped save through a biological coincidence, I replied, avoiding the question. And he's apparently prone to grand gestures of gratitude. Mia's skepticism was evident even across an ocean. Well, whatever's happening, I'm submitting my portfolio. This school is incredible. Their architecture program is ranked among the top 5 globally. After we hung up, I sat staring at the business plan again. Alexander's grand gesture was far more than mere gratitude. He had offered not just financial compensation, but a potential future for Mia and for me, a path forward that built upon my past rather than trying to erase it. The question was why? What did Alexander Richter gain from investing in my future beyond our blood arrangement? Was this another business transaction to him? A philanthropy project or something more personal that neither of us was quite ready to name? As twilight settled over the Alps, turning the snow-capped peaks to gold and then dusky purple, I made a decision. Tomorrow I would confront Alexander about his motivations and perhaps finally examine my own. The next morning I awoke to a text from Andrea. Emergency with AR overnight. Stable now but rough few hours. Thought you should know. My heart stuttered as I immediately called her. What happened? Post-surgical complication, she explained. Fluid around the heart. They had to perform an emergency procedure to drain it. He's okay now, but it was touch and go for a while. Why didn't anyone call me? I demanded, already pulling clothes from the closet. A slight pause. He specifically asked them not to disturb you. That stubborn, infuriating man. I dressed quickly and made my way to the medical wing, where I found David pacing outside his father's room, looking rumpled and exhausted in what were clearly yesterday's clothes. Mrs. Bennet, he acknowledged stiffly. I'm surprised they notified you. They didn't, I replied, choosing not to elaborate on my source. How is he stabilized? Dr. Weber says the immediate danger has passed. A muscle twitched in David's jaw. Father is asking for you. Actually has been since he regained consciousness despite my presence at his bedside all night. The thinly veiled resentment in his tone might have offended me a week ago. Now I simply felt sympathy for this young man watching his formidable father's mortality manifest so starkly while simultaneously feeling replaced in the sick room by a stranger. Your father values you greatly, I said, softening my tone. He spoke just yesterday about your exceptional management of the Asian operations. Surprise flickered across David's face before his professional mask returned. He did, I confirmed. Though he also mentioned your shared tendency to see the world primarily through risk assessment and asset protection. A reluctant smile tugged at David's lips. That sounds like father. Perhaps we could both visit him, I suggested. An olive branch of sorts. I'm sure he'd appreciate seeing us cooperate rather than compete for his attention. David studied me with new interest, reminding me strongly of his father's penetrating gaze. You're not what I expected, Mrs. Bennet. Harper, please. And what did you expect? Someone more opportunistic. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Your situation made you seem potentially predatory. My situation? A middle-aged woman with sudden financial troubles, suddenly valuable to a wealthy man. He shrugged apologetically. You must admit, from an outside perspective, it looked like I was taking advantage of your vulnerable father, I finished for him. Despite the fact that I came into this situation completely unaware of my blood's value, and your father's team sought me out, not the other way around. David had the decency to look abashed. When you put it that way. Let's go see your father, I said, ending the uncomfortable conversation. I have a few choice words for him about not notifying me of medical emergencies. Alexander looked alarmingly frail, his skin ashen against the white hospital linens, various tubes and monitors once again attached to his body, but his eyes remained sharp, lighting with something that might have been pleasure when he saw me enter with David. A united front, he observed, his voice weaker than yesterday, but still carrying that sardonic edge. Should I be concerned? Absolutely, I replied, taking the chair beside his bed while David remained standing. We formed an alliance to enforce proper rest and recovery protocols, which apparently you've been ignoring. Physician, heal thyself, David added with unexpected warmth. Or at least listen to your actual physicians. Alexander's gaze moved between us, assessing. An interesting development. What's interesting, I countered, is that you specifically requested I not be notified about your medical emergency. Care to explain? A shadow of his usual smile appeared. You needed your rest and there was nothing you could have done. That's not your decision to make, I said firmly. Not after everything we've been through. David cleared his throat. I should give you two some privacy. No, stay, Alexander said, surprising us both. What I need to discuss concerns both of you. He shifted slightly, wincing. Last night's episode was a reminder of my mortality, more acute than I'd prefer. There are matters I need to address, contingencies to arrange. Father, you're going to recover fully, David insisted, moving closer to the bed. Eventually, perhaps, but recovery is clearly more complicated than we anticipated. Alexander's gaze fixed on me. Harper, regarding the business proposal I showed you yesterday. I'd like to expedite it. Expedite it? I repeated, confused. Our banking group has numerous clients who have faced catastrophic setbacks, financial, reputational, operational. Your experience could be invaluable to them. He glanced at David. I've allocated initial funding for Eventuality Consulting as a subsidiary venture with David overseeing the financial structure while you develop the methodology and client approach. David blinked in surprise. This is the first I'm hearing of this, Father, because I've only just decided. Alexander's tone borked no argument despite his weakened state. Harper's perspective on failure and recovery is unique. Combined with our financial resources and client relationships, it represents a significant opportunity. I sat back processing the implications. So, you want me to work for our banking group with Alexander corrected as a partner in a new venture, one that benefits from our infrastructure while maintaining its independent approach and expertise. He turned to David. The proposal documents are in my private safe. Blackwood knows the combination. David hesitated, clearly torn between professional curiosity about this new business direction and concern about his father's health. We should discuss this when you're stronger. We're discussing it now, Alexander said with a flash of his usual authority. Because I may not have the luxury of perfect timing. The blunt acknowledgement of his mortality silenced us both momentarily. Finally, I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. Why are you doing this, Alexander? His eyes, sunken with exhaustion, but still piercingly intelligent, held mine. Because some debts can't be paid with money alone. Because talent shouldn't be wasted due to circumstance. Because you rebuilt me with your blood and I would offer the same opportunity for rebuilding in return. The raw honesty in his voice struck me deeply. This wasn't merely a business proposition or philanthropic gesture. It was something more personal, a recognition of shared experience despite our vastly different circumstances. David, watching this exchange with evident fascination, cleared his throat. I'll retrieve those documents and give them proper review. If you're serious about this venture, Father, it deserves thorough diligence. After he left, silence settled between Alexander and me. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter. You haven't answered, Harper. Would you consider it? I studied him. This complex man who had upended my life as completely as my blood had transformed his. I'm not certain I'm ready to build something new from the ashes of my old life, especially something so closely tied to you and your family. Because of my son's suspicions or your own. Both perhaps. I hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. I'm not entirely sure what's happening between us, Alexander. Whatever it is, it complicates a business relationship. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Yes, it does. And yet you're proposing one anyway. I'm providing an opportunity. What you build with it, professionally or otherwise, remains your choice. He shifted again, a grimace of pain crossing his features. Last night, when they were rushing me back to surgery, I had a moment of perfect clarity. Do you know what I regretted most in that moment? I shook my head. Not the business deals I've missed or the wealth I've accumulated or even the relationships I've neglected. What I regretted was the possibility of not seeing what you would do next. How you would rebuild your life with or without the resources I could offer. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was a strangely specific regret for a man facing potential death. The admission hung in the air between us, weighted with implications neither of us seemed ready to fully articulate. Before I could respond, Dr. Weber entered with a team of nurses for Alexander's examination. "We'll need privacy, Mrs. Bennet," he said apologetically. I rose unexpectedly reluctant to leave. "I'll think about your proposal," I told Alexander. "Do," he replied simply. "But don't overthink it. You have excellent instincts, Harper. Trust them." As I walked back to my suite, his words echoed in my mind. Trust my instincts. The same instincts that had led me to build a successful business only to watch it collapse. The same instincts that had kept me in a marriage with Gavin far longer than I should have. The same instincts that now pulled me toward a complex entanglement with a billionaire banker whose blood literally contained my own. Yet beneath the doubt and confusion, a small voice of certainty whispered, whatever was happening with Alexander Richter, whatever came next, it represented the first genuine path forward I'd glimpsed since my world collapsed 6 months ago. Not a return to what was lost, but something entirely new. Something built on the unexpected foundation of two broken people finding value in each other beyond biology or finance. Trust my instincts. Perhaps it was finally time to try. 3 weeks after Alexander's surgery, I stood at the window of my Chicago apartment. Not the penthouse I'd lost, but a comfortable 2-bedroom overlooking the lake in a quieter neighborhood. The first portion of the Richter payment had arrived shortly after we returned from Switzerland, enough to clear my most pressing debts and secure this modest but pleasant new beginning. The apartment was sparsely furnished. I'd started fresh rather than trying to reclaim pieces of my former life. The walls remained mostly bare, waiting for new memories to fill them rather than echoing past glories. Only my desk held remnants of before. A small crystal award from the Chamber of Commerce recognizing elegance by Harper's contribution to the city's hospitality industry and a framed photo of Mia from her high school graduation. My phone chimed with a message from Mia herself. "Apartment hunting in Geneva tomorrow. Can't believe I got the scholarship. Call you after to show you the options." I smiled, heart swelling with pride. The International College of Design had not only accepted Mia's portfolio, but awarded her their prestigious Global Innovator Scholarship, a genuine recognition of her talent. Regardless of Alexander's initial connection, my daughter was rebuilding her future on her own terms, just as I was attempting to do with mine. The Eventuality Consulting proposal sat open on my dining table, surrounded by notes, market research, and potential client profiles I'd been reviewing. After weeks of consideration and numerous video calls with David and the RTOR legal team, I decided to move forward with the venture with several key modifications to maintain my independence. Instead of a RTOR subsidiary, Eventuality would be my own company with RTOR Banking Group as a minority investor and strategic partner. I would control the methodology and client approach while benefiting from their financial resources and networks. The arrangement preserved my autonomy while acknowledging the practical advantages of their support. My phone rang. Not Mia but Tim Blackwood. "Harper," he greeted me, his tone warmer than during our first meeting. Our shared experiences in Switzerland had transformed him from Alexander's formal representative to something approaching a colleague. "I've just received the signed partnership agreements from our legal department. Everything is proceeding as scheduled." And Alexander, I asked the question that always hovered beneath our professional discussions. "How is his recovery progressing?" Steadily, Blackwood replied. "He's working half days from his residence in Zurich, much to Dr. Weber's continued frustration. Some patients are more cooperative than others," I observed dryly. Indeed, a pause then. "He's asked about your visit next month. Should I confirm those arrangements?" My upcoming trip to Switzerland, ostensibly for final blood tests and partnership meetings, hung between us, its personal implications unacknowledged but understood. As I confirmed, "The dates we discussed still work." After we hung up, I returned to the window, watching twilight settle over Lake Michigan. The water reflected the deepening blue of the sky, reminding me of those quiet evenings on my balcony in Switzerland, contemplating an uncertain future that had since gained definition and purpose. A knock at my door interrupted my reverie. I wasn't expecting visitors, but the building had good security, so I opened it without concern, and found Gavin standing there immaculately dressed as always. "Harper," he greeted me with the winning smile that had once made my heart flutter. Now it simply reminded me of a salesman's practiced charm. "Your new place is lovely, though the security downstairs is quite persistent." "That's rather the point of security," I replied coolly, not inviting him in. What do you want, Gavin? He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I thought we should talk. Our attorneys are making this process more contentious than necessary. Our attorneys are doing their jobs. Mine is protecting my interests and yours is trying to claim money he has no legal right to. Gavin's smile tightened. There's no need for hostility. We were married for 25 years. Surely we can discuss this reasonably. We could have discussed many things reasonably. I agreed. When my business collapsed, when I needed support, when our daughter had to leave college, you chose to walk away instead. I made a mistake, he admitted with practiced contrition. I panicked, seeing everything we'd built together crumbling so suddenly. I didn't handle it well. And now that I have money again, you've had a change of heart. How convenient. His expression hardened slightly. That's unfair, Harper. I've had months to reflect on my actions. Coincidentally, the same month during which news of my Golden Blood and Artyom connection appeared in the financial press, I leaned against the doorframe, studying the man I'd once loved. Did you know Mia received a prestigious scholarship to study in Europe? No thanks to you. I heard, he said, surprising me. Claire mentioned it when I called her last week. Of course, he'd maintained contact with my sister. Claire had always been slightly in awe of Gavin's polished charm. I'm proud of her, he continued. She's always been talented. Despite myself, I softened slightly. Whatever Gavin's failings as a husband, he'd generally been a good father when present. She has. Taking advantage of the momentary thaw, he pressed further. Could I come in just for a few minutes? I have a proposal that might resolve our situation amicably. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside, allowing him into my new space. He surveyed the apartment with barely concealed assessment, no doubt calculating its value compared to our former penthouse. I see you've started fresh, he commented, noting the minimal furnishings. In more ways than one. I gestured to the couch but remained standing myself. What's your proposal? Gavin sat, crossing his legs casually as if we were discussing dinner plans rather than divorce terms. I'm prepared to drop all claims to the Artyom compensation in exchange for a one-time settlement, a clean break, no further legal entanglements. How generous, I replied, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. And how much would this clean break cost me? He named a figure that, while substantial, was far less than his lawyers had been demanding. Under different circumstances, I might have considered it simply to end the conflict. But something had fundamentally changed in me since that day at the donation center. No, I said simply, his confident expression faltered. No, your claim has no legal merit, Gavin. The separation agreement clearly divided our assets. The Artyom arrangement came months after you left when we were living completely separate lives. Our divorce isn't finalized because your attorneys have been deliberately delaying it. I interrupted. My blood, my arrangement, my compensation. You abandoned me when I had nothing. You don't get to return now that I have something. He stood, the charming facade cracking to reveal the calculation beneath. This new confidence doesn't suit you, Harper. Alexander Richter may have put stars in your eyes with his billions and business opportunities, but you're out of your depth. You always have been in the financial realm. And yet here I am rebuilding while you're reduced to knocking on my door begging for handouts. The words were harsh, but delivered calmly without the emotional turmoil such a confrontation would have triggered months ago. My attorneys will contact yours with our final position. This conversation is over. After showing him out, I returned to the window, surprised by my own composure. 6 months ago, Gavin's abandonment had devastated me. Now his reappearance barely ruffled my equilibrium. My phone rang again. Alexander this time, as if conjured by Gavin's accusations. Is this a bad time? He asked when I answered, the connection crystal clear despite the ocean between us. Actually, it's perfect timing, I replied, settling into my reading chair. Gavin just left. Ah, a world of understanding in that single syllable. And how did that encounter go? Better than expected. For me at least. Probably not for his ego. Alexander's soft chuckle warmed me despite the distance. I wish I could have witnessed it. You're quite formidable when properly motivated. A quality we apparently share, I observed. Blackwood says you're working half days against medical advice. Blackwood reports too thoroughly, he grumbled, though without real annoyance. How are the partnership arrangements proceeding? We discussed business for several minutes, the structure of eventuality consulting, potential early clients, marketing approaches before drifting into more personal territory. Have you decided yet? he asked finally, the question I'd been expecting. I gazed out at the darkening lake, considering my answer carefully. Alexander had presented me with a secondary proposal alongside the business venture, one far more personal in nature. After his recovery, he'd suggested spending 6 months in Chicago, ostensibly to help launch Eventuality, but with the unspoken purpose of exploring whatever connection had developed between us. Yes, I said, having finally reached the decision during Gavin's visit. I think we should see what this is between us without the extraordinary circumstances of hospitals and billion-dollar banking empires clouding the issue. And if it's nothing, he asked, a rare vulnerability in his voice. Then we'll have a successful business partnership and an unusual friendship with a remarkable origin story, I replied. But I don't think it's nothing, Alexander. Neither do I. The simple admission carried more weight than flowery declarations might have. 1 month until your visit. I've scheduled the follow-up blood tests with Dr. Weber for Monday morning, which leaves us the rest of the week for less medical interactions. We spoke for nearly an hour more, discussing everything from Mia's apartment hunt in Geneva to Alexander's plans for gradually transferring more operational control to David. There was an ease to our conversation that belied the complexities of our situation, the age difference, the geographical distance, the vast disparity in our financial worlds. Even with my improved circumstances, after we hung up, I moved to my desk and picked up the small vial I kept there, a token Dr. Weber had given me before I left Switzerland, containing a tiny sample of my golden blood preserved in a clear resin pendant. In the lamplight, it glowed a deep, rich crimson, the physical embodiment of the extraordinary value I'd carried within me all along, unrecognized until a moment of desperate need revealed it. I returned to the dining table and reached for a blank notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote Eventuality Beyond Crisis Management. Then below it, Chapter 1, The Value Within. My story wasn't just about blood or money or even unexpected second chances. It was about discovering that true worth exists independent of external validation or circumstance. A lesson I hope to share with others facing their own moments of collapse and reinvention. Outside, the Chicago skyline sparkled against the night sky. As beautiful from this new vantage point as it had been from my penthouse, just different, like my life itself. Irrevocably changed, yet somehow more authentic than before. Not defined by what I'd lost, but by what I'd found within myself. Golden blood, yes, but also resilience, clarity, and the courage to begin again. Not an ending, but a continuation on my own terms, in my own way, with unexpected allies and opportunities one could never have imagined when I walked into that donation center seeking $40 and found millions instead. Do not forget to subscribe our channel and share your story in the comments section, because it also reflects your time through which you passed.